Welcome back to Outriders. In this one, we are going through the dev news, but I also have an image that was shared with me on Discord, and that is talking about the possibility of stuff for DLC, like some of the things that they have been told about that the community want in the game. So this game, as a lot of you will know, is still declining. They are still dropping. They can't even reach like 1,500 players in a 24-hour window. It's got really bad, and it's just going to continue to get worse. I'll leave this linked in the description, the Reddit part of it, the actual developer news, because there are some things that you might want to go through or whatever, but I'm not going to read it out because I've covered it a few times already. But if I quickly go to the bottom of this and go to the ongoing list of currently tracked issues, they mention State of Stadia, how they have for the last month to 6 weeks or something. And it says, today's general news update also covers Stadia as a platform we are continuing to work on. However, you go back to the index of the dev news and patch news, upcoming fixes and changes, ongoing list of currently tracked issues, recent informative dev Reddit comments and threads, other helpful links. So there's not actually any general news. It seems as the majority of this, it seems as though the majority of this entire dev news is the fact that they've added it looks like the letter O, they've added it to the beginning of every sentence or topic in the ongoing list of currently tracked issues. So it looks like the BTEC bullet point sort of thing. They haven't changed pretty much anything in the upcoming fixes and changes. So the patch news is the only thing I'll cover. It says, unfortunately, whilst we were hard at work on the latest patch, or whilst we are hard at work on the latest patch, we have run into a couple of issues that cannot be overlooked and must be resolved before we can release this update. So this is the second patch in a row that has been delayed. And it says some of the upcoming changes we have planned mean we cannot release this latest patch until we are satisfied it's in the absolutely best possible place. We hope to share more on information on this latest patch with you very soon. To give some insight, one of these issues is the player privilege rights feature is currently failing to correctly block players on some platforms. I have no idea what the player privilege rights feature is. My guess is the ability to matchmake, because it says it's failing to correctly block players on some platforms. And I'm guessing that's to do with running trainers, because you've never been able to matchmake properly if you have a trainer enabled. They carried on to say, we understand that this feature is important to the player experience, so we are investigating why this is currently not operational. It's not actually, depending on what it is, it's not really important to the player experience. All the other bugs and issues, especially in multiplayer, are the biggest, most important things to the player experience, but they seem to be ignoring that incredibly often. It says we are currently targeting a release next week for the patch. However, this is dependent on when we are confident these issues are resolved, meaning there is the potential it could be released at a later date. And some of the things being fixed to further improve the visibility of the Broodmother Surge AoE skill limits. Then they've got bugs with reviving players. They've got the really bad frame drops in Scorched Lands, which has been ongoing for months now. They've got a bug that will cause client shots, so if you're not hosting a multiplayer game, to sometimes deal no actual damage to enemies. I've noticed that more and more the more I play. But that's just a few things coming into this patch whenever they release it. And it says here, as a reminder, 2 weeks ago we released a patch that featured buffs for all classes, no it didn't, crash fixes I don't know about, improved multiplayer performance and various other bug fixes. Full details can be found here, there's a link to it. Improved multiplayer performance, well no they didn't, because multiplayer is still as dreadful as it's been for the last 5 months. They've still got issues with the AFKs in the Outriders camp. People are finding ways to bypass it. There is still yellow bar connections all the time, sometimes red. There's still packet loss all the time. And they were supposed to have done it so that the matchmaking is more region-based. So why is the lag still there? It's because P2P servers. No matter how many bandages you put on these servers, you can't fix them. You need to go dedicated, which they won't. So there will probably, say for an example, they try and do every 2 week updates for the next year, they're still going to have issues with multiplayer because of the servers. But that's pretty much it. That's the whole patch news done. They've just said that they've delayed yet another patch. this is the part that I feel is the main focus of this video. And I want to talk to you about this because this is absurd. Just how you can think like this, I have no idea. And I'm guessing this stuff's been passed on because the person who's written this is the Archon, like the most active community manager for this game on Reddit. And this was shared to me on Discord. We are fully aware of ongoing requests to rotate his inventory. Talking about Tiago, the legendary vendor in the Outriders camp. Just as we are aware of requests for transmog, loadouts, item locking, new content, new maps, etc, etc, the list goes on. I don't have any news about any of these things at this point in time, except to say, as previously, that we are aware of the community's desire for these things. Bear in mind, however, that all these requests are new content. Even rotating Tiago's store would require careful design and planning, code, UI, localization work, and more. Implementing such a feature is significantly more resource intensive than other things. No. It is not new content to rotate a vendor. There are vendors already in the game that have rotations on them. You don't have to create entirely new code. You just need to tweak the code that's already there for a part of the game. And it's not new content in any way, shape or form. Content is like missions, weapons, gear, all that sort of stuff. It's basically something you can play in the game. You can't play the fucking vendors. Tiago rotating is not new content. The fact that that has even been said goes to show how not a single person within this game knows what they're talking about. Even the Archon. To even write that, you've got to not be thinking straight. Content in a game. You go and you buy a movie, the content of the movie is everything that happens in the movie. You go and buy a video game, the content is the stuff you can play. Music, the content is what you listen to. Movies is what you watch. Video games is what you play. You play missions. You play with gear. You play with weapons. You can't play a vendor. There is no way that you can actually be serious when you say that rotating Tiago's stock in the vendor screen would be new content. It has got quotation marks, but that doesn't make a difference. Just the fact that rotating stock in a vendor and new content are within the same paragraph is ridiculous. But it carries on. Despite appearances and a raging debate about it, we still maintain that Outriders is not a live service game. Yes, it is live service. It's having patches all the bloody time. If it's not live service, it should have been released under early access and it should have been cheaper for the player. There is no way they can say this is a full release. Everything we are doing with patches and buffs are to get the base Outriders experience into the best possible shape. When they said in the patch news for the developer news, which was dated the 26th of August, they said 2 weeks ago we released a patch that featured buffs for all classes. To technically, yeah, whatever, it buffed some of the skills, but there were only slight buffs there and one or two here and there, because most of it was cooldown reduction, which technically, yes, it's a buff because it's lowering the cooldown reduction sort of thing, but at the same time, if you think about it, they only did things to the skills that nobody uses in the classes. So technically they buffed stuff, but it wasn't a buff that players are going to be able to take advantage of because nobody uses them skills. If that makes sense. An actual buff for classes would have been, Earthquake, we're increasing its damage by 10%. That's a buff. When you're buffing things that are irrelevant in the game, it's bad enough. But then when the big majority of it was cooldown reductions, they're not really buffs. Yeah, you can use them faster, but there's no damage increase, no AoE effect that's stronger or anything like that. I wouldn't class that as a buff. But after that, they've said we are not making any ongoing money through microtransactions or subscriptions, so we need to ensure that we are able to work on the most important things first and foremost, stabilizing and improving the base experience before we dream of bigger and better things. So in other words, they're going to patch up the game, they're going to get it into a decent spot where players have started praising it again, and then they're going to try slapping in some microtransactions. Or the DLC they release where one of the big like flagship features is rotating Tiago stock. They're going to charge money for that stuff. Again, this doesn't mean those things are impossible to consider for the future, but there is a priority list that needs to be worked through first, and right now, stabilization and improvement of what is already there is the highest priority. So improvement of Tiago's shop is having legendary stuff rotate. I mean, it's too late for a lot of players, but the fact that they want to work on stabilization, just go and buy dedicated servers, then a lot of your issues are gone. And the Archon keeps banging on about there's a priority list. Why is it priority that you sort out the journal entries for secondary characters? That is not a priority. And all the stuff that's come in previous patches, how is that a priority over a global issue with the Scorched Lands expedition? How is any of that a priority over part of the campaign having a progression blocker? This development team just seems to be getting worse and worse as time goes on. They're not doing a single thing that's going to bring players back. The game right now, for its core, seems to be in an okay sort of spot. Matchmaking's getting tougher because there's less players. There are bugs, but they're at least in my experience, they're nowhere near as bad as they once were. Another thing about how they prioritize stuff, the last patch they were fixing descriptions. They were flipping mods around instead of just changing the names around. They don't have a clue what they are doing with this game. It's shown ever since the game launched. The fact that you have a demo that performs in a more stable way than your full release is bad enough. I know a demo's a lot easier to deal with. They still had really bad issues through the demo, but the demo was a lot more enjoyable than the full game. A demo is supposed to be a portion of what you're going to be able to experience. But yeah, I'm done. As I said, the dev news will be in the description. I can't be bothered to carry this on. It's so laughable. How can you sit there and be happy with saying the rotating stock in a legendary vendor is quote-unquote new content? It's not new, especially because the vendor already exists, the coding for rotating stock already exists, and Tiago has already previously sold legendaries. So all you need to do is just make sure that new stock becomes available on a timer. It might take a little bit of coding, might be a little bit tough here and there, adding it into the game, but it's not going to be anywhere near as bad as they make out, nowhere near as tough as they make out, and is not new content because you can't play a fucking vendor. And transmog, what's the point in Outriders? Honestly, whoever's requesting transmog in all these looter shooters needs to stop. But that's going to do it for the video. Let me know your thoughts and stuff in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed it.